Welcome back to the RTA in Japan Marathon, English Restream, courtesy of Speed Gamers. My name is Clage. I'm going to be your commentator for this Castlevania Bloodlines, better known as Vampire Killer in the Japanese Mega Drive version. And our runner today is going to be wasare66, who has been running Bloodlines for a little while. I've caught a few of his streams here and there. Going to be running the Japanese version, so slight differences from the American version, though normal difficulty is fairly consistent with its American counterpart. So if you've ever watched Bloodlines be played in America at a GDQ or anything, you'll see a lot of similarities to that style run for the normal difficulty. But I've been learning way too much about this game for almost the past decade, so I'll try to provide some worthwhile information and help you all understand how Bloodlines works as a speed run and what wasare66 is going to be trying to accomplish here with his run. Before we get started, probably the biggest thing to note if you are a fan of classic Castlevania speed runs, the big difference you're going to see in Bloodlines is damage boosting is not ideal, nor is it going to be optimized for most situations in this game. And the reason for that is Castlevania Bloodlines has kind of a unique mechanic that other classic Castlevanias don't. It actually has a third upgrade to the normal whip upgrade system where you collect the two emblems and, your whip changes from a whip to a chain whip to a longer chain whip. In this case, since we're going to be doing the Eric Lacard category, it's going to be a spear into a longer spear into a much longer spear. But there is a third hidden upgrade that is only obtainable in two ways. There is a Bible in stage 1 that can give you the fully upgraded version of your weapon. It's a 50-50 coin flip. There's no way to manipulate it. Nothing you do is going to impact it. It's just, did you get it or did you not? So ideally when you're doing runs for time and nothing else, you want that drop to happen in stage 1. If you're running for higher level times, it's an automatic reset if you don't get that drop. So 50% of your runs die 30 seconds in the run. In an RTA situation, for a marathon, it can actually be more beneficial to not get that drop, because the big caveat with the what is commonly referred to as the super whip or super spear is that once you have it, if you get hit once, any damage whatsoever, you lose it. It goes away. The only way to recollect it is to break 30 candles that do not contain sub-weapons while holding the second best spear, and then that last candle will drop the upgrade again, and then you have it until you drop it. So you see wasare66, pretty standard issue, the intro Castlevania hallway into the castle has the second level spear. And early on here, pretty standard fanfare. You've got a nice homage to the original Castlevania and some good old-fashioned zombies in the room. And this is the room where the breakable wall down in the lower right corner is going to have the book I was talking about that can give you the upgrade. In this case, did not get it. The other thing the book drops if it does not give you the upgrade is 20 sub-weapon ammo. So an RTA situation, that's kind of nice. So you did see that wasare66, after grabbing the book, did a giant pole vault jump. That's another unique mechanic to Bloodlines. Both characters have a unique powerful ability. In Lacard's case, that super jump allows him to skip very specific parts of various stages, and also allows him to be invulnerable for the entire time that jump is active, which is really useful for different bosses and stuff. So first sub boss here, Cerebus. Nothing too interesting there. I hope you like bosses and sub bosses in this game. You're going to see a lot of them. A little bit of trouble there on the stairs, but should be no big deal. There is some collectible meat in stage 1 if wasare66 needs to diverge for that, so no big deal. This is the first interesting trick of the marathon. wasare66 with the health down is gonna not skip this. You can actually go up and sit about a pixel or two away from that bone pillar and super jump up to the platform, but again, opting to play it a little safe after that damage in the staircase area. And the other big caveat here is that since wasare66 doesn't have the upgraded spear, he's not doing near as much damage as you would like to. The trade-off between the two characters is that Lacard you can think of as the speedy character, whereas Morris is the power character. He does a ton of damage, comparatively to Lucard, but he moves slower and his attacks have longer startup. So there you go. That's the 30th candle broke. Now he has the very pretty looking flame spear, which will be handy coming up here. You'll also notice that his sub-weapon changed in the process. Oh, it didn't wait quite long enough for the Bone Dragon to back-tread there after hitting it. So unfortunately now is down to 1 health and no spear. It's a little bit of a rough start, but we'll see if Wasore can navigate the Armor Battler boss here. This is our first boss in the game, Armor Battler. He, like everything else in stage 1, is incredibly random. And yeah, right off the bat, that's kind of tough to deal with. That's a lot of damage. So a little bit of a rough start, but we'll let Wasore kind of regain his footing here and get going. So the unfortunate thing about dying to Armor Battler is now he'll be working with only the level 2 spear, not even the... Oh, no, it does drop it. Okay. That might be a slight difference from the Japanese version. I can't remember. There are a lot of bosses, if you die on them, you will not be able to collect your second level spear. But in this case, good to go. So Armor Battler is an incredibly obnoxious boss for speedrun purposes. He's incredibly random, which is more of a problem for Lucard than it is Morris, because again, Lucard can't quite put down the damage Morris can. And Armor Battler works as a phase-based boss. The more you hit him, you see the more of his equipment. He's now down to no arms and just his legs. And there we go. Wasore gets the kill, and we're all good. So that's stage 1 down. Nice recovery there after a little bit of marathon nerves and an untimely death, but easy enough to kind of get going. Sometimes it's nice to have an early death when you're running a marathon. It kind of just gets rid of the nerves. You're not trying to make a perfect attempt happen anymore, and can ease into your run. So stage 2 is where we start seeing a pattern in the first few stages of Bloodlines. You're going to see some auto-scrolling and, of course, more mini-bosses. I mentioned earlier, in normal and expert difficulty of Bloodlines, whether it's the English or Japanese version, you fight a grand total of 22 combined bosses and sub-bosses. So this game is all about maximizing your damage, maximizing boss fights. That's how you gain the vast majority of time in these runs. So you spend a lot of time learning how boss patterns work and what you can do to make those go quicker. So for the auto-scroller here, pretty standard fanfare. The water's going to rise. If the water rises entirely over your hitbox, you go into what's considered a drowning state. You take a hit, and it does quite a bit of damage, but it will not kill you automatically unless, of course, you fall off the bottom of the stage, which is considered a pit hazard and is an instant death. So but on normal difficulty, this is a pretty trivial auto-scroller. When you get up into expert difficulty, there's some obnoxious ghosts that spawn in various areas that make this a little bit more difficult to navigate, but for this part, pretty straightforward. And as soon as Wasore gets up to the top here, we're going to have a mini-boss gauntlet that is one of the more interesting parts of this stage. So the Minotaur, and we're going to introduce you to mini-boss number 1 of 3 in this little gauntlet, known as Water Mage. So Water Mage always teleports to where you are not facing, and that's a big problem for him, because what happens is if you just face the other way, he'll teleport behind you and get stuck there, and then upstep kills him. Second mini-boss, you saw him appear on the right side of the screen. Yeah, he's gone. He doesn't exist anymore. That's a glitch. If you throw the item crash axe, that Golem-style mini-boss that appeared on the right side of the screen is programmed to back up. Backs up about 2 to 3 steps. In this case, the trigger for the final mini-boss, the mini-boss that appeared on the left that you only got to see his halberd swinging, his trigger to come on screen is when the second mini-boss disappears off screen. And in this case, because of the way the game loads, if you force him to back up those steps, the game just considers him non-existent anymore, and Big Brother comes out to play instead. So there you go. A nice 3 mini-boss rush that takes very little time. There are some pretty obscene strats you can do on the halberd mini-boss. Wasore opted for a slightly more conservative but still very quick use of the axe sub-weapon. There's only 3 sub-weapons in Castlevania Bloodlines. There's the axe, the holy water, and the boomerang. In addition to the super sub-weapon, which we'll get to when it comes time to play. I'll explain that a little bit, but this is the game where Holy Water is bad. It's a really, really bad sub-weapon in this game. It does pitiful damage. It's got a bad hitbox. It doesn't linger, so you can stack it like you can in other classic Castlevanias. And This game was actually made right after Rondo of Blood, which is the Castlevania game that introduced item crashes. This game also has those. So if you just hit the sub-weapon button, you'll throw a regular sub-weapon. Nice jump over the Bone Dragon there. Good work. Keep the spear. At this point, Wasarimono's big task here is to keep the powered-up spear and the super sub-weapon all the way to the boss, because that's going to make the boss trivial. So far, so good on that. But to go over the rest of the sub-weapons real quick, the boomerang is not bad. It still doesn't do great damage, but it's got a nice hitbox, has some good utility and such. Its item crash is pretty solid, but the axe is a monster in this game. It does horrendous amounts of damage to normal enemies and is super powerful. So we're going to introduce you to the Stone Golem. Super sub-weapon doesn't care much about Stone Golem. I think Wasarimono is going to be about one sub-weapon short of just outright killing the Stone Golem, but yeah, just one, but knock down the last two pillars and that's an easy kill. So yeah, the super sub-weapon is very, very powerful, but again, much like your regular, much like the powered-up spear, if you get hit once, you lose that. You don't have access to it. And the other thing is that regular sub-weapons all cost 1 ammo in this game. They don't have differentiating costs. It's just regular sub-weapon is 1, an item crash is 3. The super sub-weapon is 8, and that's a lot of sub-weapon ammo. The other problem with Lucard's super sub-weapon is you saw those giant green projectiles on screen going non-stop. Those do collision detection on every single frame, so they cause a ton of lag when they're on screen. Stage 3 here is one of the most obnoxious to speedrun in the game, mainly because harpies exist. Harpies are the bane of a speedrunner's existence for Castlevania Bloodlines. So far, we're getting good RNG. They're cooperating, so that was quite nice. The big thing with harpies is they're one of the most random enemies in the game. They're very difficult to manipulate into doing what you want. Nice skip over the peeping eye there. It's a pretty classic Castlevania thing. You put an enemy in hit stun and their hitbox doesn't exist for a little bit. Let's see if these harpies want to cooperate. Nice. Okay, excellent. Harpies are behaving for a marathon run. Who knew it was possible? Up next, we have another mini-boss. It's a Bone Dragon. Literally just your everyday Castlevania white Bone Dragon. That qualifies as a mini boss here. We're going to move on to yet another auto-scroller. If you're tired of auto-scrollers, I promise after stage 3 they're done. Castlevania Bloodlines has a very odd layout for auto-scrollers. You get a bunch of them in stages 2 and 3, and then none for the rest of the game. So this climbing of the Leaning Tower of Pisa is what I have colloquially dubbed as Mode 3.5. It's actually some very creative use of the Genesis parallax scrolling to make the tower wobble back and forth. And it is mostly just visual noise to kind of make this climb seem a little bit more difficult than it is. But it does occasionally cause a problem where, because the platforms tilt against the parallax, if you jump on the very, very, very edge of a platform, it can sometimes lose its hitbox for a minute, and you will just fall right off of it, oftentimes to your death. So when you're climbing up these, you want to do your best to stay in the middle. And now up to the mummy room. Good use of the outstanding hitbox on the spear and the mummy's lack of hit stun. Enemies have varying hit stun in Bloodlines. Some enemies you have to wait a long time to be able to hit them again. Other enemies like the Minotaurs and the mummies have almost no hit stun. So if you just hold the spear out on them, they'll die pretty quickly. Unfortunately, did take a hit there, so he's going to not have access for the super spear. The super sub weapon is pretty irrelevant for this boss fight coming up. You would not use it really in any situation, but the losing the spear is losing a ton of damage, which is a bit unfortunate. So I'm going to continue the auto-scrolling climb, because you know, if you've ever been to the Leaning Tower of Pisa in real life, then this is how you get to the top. You climb the floating platforms, fight off the bone gargoyles, and try not to fall to your death, and then you get to see the great view at the end. As we move forward here, you see collecting some sub-weapon ammo. Sub-weapon ammo is gems, crystals in the Genesis version here. Just one of those things where a lot of times when Konami put one of their core franchises on the Genesis, they tend to change things up quite a bit, try to make it its own thing. And Bloodlines is very much that. It has that Castlevania feel, but it is very much its own game, and there's no other Castlevania really like it. So the nice thing about sub-weapon ammo in this game is that you do not lose it between stages. There's no countdown to give you points for how many sub-weapon ammo you collected, and you go back to the base of 5. You actually get to keep all your sub-weapon ammo, so... Next, we are going to take on the Bat Gargoyle. This is a phase-based boss, 3 phases. You cannot over-damage him in any phase whatsoever. Nice use of the axe to basically cough up very little time. The powered-up spear would obviously make this a little faster, but right now, Wasure Mono putting that axe to good use. As I said, really powerful sub-weapon, excellent hitbox, does a ton of damage. The only downside to using sub-weapons on bosses is that for all but one boss in the entire game, that's an excellent fight, by the way. Very, very well done by Wasure Mono. With the exception of one notable boss in the entire game, sub-weapons do half damage to bosses. Kind of a way to encourage the player to have to engage more in melee range and not be able to just hoard sub-weapon ammo and try and cheese out a boss by throwing long-distance weapons. So, but that was an excellent stage 3, other than the hiccup in the mummy room. Harpies cooperated, really good boss fight. And now we're on to stage 4, which is both a personal favorite and absolute nightmare of mine. This is probably the most difficult stage in the game to speedrun at the highest level. This has some of the most technical tricks in the game. We'll see if Wasure Mono wants to incorporate those for a marathon run or not. But there's some really interesting stuff in stage 4, and when you try to put it all together, it becomes a very difficult stage to hit everything in a single run. So Wasure Mono is going to be recollecting candles here. Most likely has kept the count in his head, so he knows where he's going to recollect the spear, because this is the one stage in the game where a damage boost is actually incredibly valuable. And we'll get to that when we get there. So going through the treadmills here, and now let's see if Wasure Mono is going to attempt piston skip. He is, very nice. Sketch it, nice. Very well done. First try, got the full zip. So the gist of that trick is if you throw a sub-weapon while you're rising on your jump, you get a little bit more height than you're supposed to. And what happens is if you do that, it allows you to get on top of that piston, get pushed into the wall, which allows you to zip all the way up and then turn around and zip out of the wall into the exit. So that saves close to 12 seconds if it's done optimally in that room. Now here through the pendulum room. Up the door, and we're going to fight Frankenstein's monster, who has a whip of his own in this game, but is not terribly threatening because he doesn't really understand how height works. So, like a lot of the many bosses, not terribly threatening. This next room is the most infamous room in the speedrun, the blade room. Gonna opt for a buffer strat, and a little too early. That's unfortunate. The blades do a lot of damage. So, all the blades in this room can be effectively skipped rather than doing them properly. Nice recovery there to make his way through the second one after the strat went awry on the first one. But when done right, you will basically skip the first blade, walk through the second blade without being harmed, and then use that little enemy at the very end to get a damage boost through the third blade. The reason this works is because the hitboxes for those giant blades are programmed in a very interesting manner. They each have a single pixel hitbox, 4 of them total, and that's unfortunate. The super sub-weapon drop there just fell out of that candle, and unfortunately fell because the moving platforms are not considered platforms for sub-weapons, or for any kind of drop. So unfortunately it fell into the pit, which is a big problem. That's going to make finishing out damage here really difficult. Nice save there, though, so we'll see if Wasure Mono can go through Armor Battler here, excuse me, not Armor Battler, Gear Steamer, without a hit, which is not trivial to do on this low health. Yeah, the blade room is really interesting. Like I said, 4 pixels on each side, evenly spaced out, so if you know what you're doing, it's very easy to thread the needle on them, and just take no damage all the way through. If you mess up, on Expert mode, you're almost certainly dead. On Normal mode, you saw just barely enough health to survive. And Wasure Mono trying to finish this off. Okay. Baits the jump out. Should have enough to finish this. Couple more. Very nice. Good recovery. Very, very good recovery. The only downside here is if you do ever die to Gear Steamer here, you get one of the greatest animations in the game. He starts literally dancing because he killed you. It's one of the most adorable sprite animations in the entire game. So that was a strong recovery. That is not easy to go through the moving platform room into gear steamer with 1 health in a marathon run, that'll make you sweat real hard. So very nicely done there by Wasarimono to keep going. Stage 5 here in Versailles is really, really interesting. This stage is very difficult for Licard, not quite as much for Morris. You saw the flashing there. The pollen that falls on him is not actually doing any damage. It just reverses left and right on your controller, and does it for a set amount of time. So pretty easy to navigate once you know the timing. You just swap left and right, and then swap back when you know it's going to run out. Now, these things are the worst. These Vine Monkey enemies are what I consider to be the single most annoying enemy for a casual run of this game. They take an obscene amount of damage to kill, and they have ridiculous hitboxes. Wasarimono opting for a very nice marathon strat there, just opting to go up, wait for them to swing back, and super jump through them. So very smart there. And now we're going to move into the long hallway with a whole bunch of axe armors. The nice thing for Wasarimono here is since he doesn't have the super spear, he can afford to take some hits and damage boost through this. And the other nice thing is you're seeing environmental hazards and bloodlines one-shot any enemy that runs into them. So those chandeliers, they won't kill Licard outright, but if they hit an enemy, they're just dead. And damage boost through the Sword Knight. He does 2 damage on normal in Japan, if I remember right. He does pitiful damage. I don't really know why. And this giant bone pillar, we're going to ignore that too. So, again, as I mentioned at the early part of the run, damage boosting is not optimal in Bloodlines, but in this situation where you don't have the fully upgraded spear and you're just trying to make your way through, it saves a lot of time in that case. In a maximum level run where you're trying to squeeze every second out, you actually want to maintain the spear throughout this entire stage, and it takes some very special finagling to make that happen without incident. So this hallway, we have the Harpies dropping Fleamen. So far, Harpies are behaving. Oh, loses the sub-weapon, though. That's unfortunate. Because we haven't seen it yet, and it looks like we're not going to in this run, but Harpies have a very obnoxious trait. Harpies, when they take fatal damage, sometimes don't die. Their heads pop off, and when they do, they get a bleed animation that lags the game a whole lot. So, thankfully, don't have to deal with that today for Wasarimono, but when it happens, it's not very fun. This is a similar enemy to the mini-boss that was skipped in Stage 2 with the Item Crash Axe. He can't reach the ground, so if you duck under him, he literally cannot hit you, and he will never walk all the way forward at you. So, pretty safe to hit. You can soft lock the game there, however, if you throw an Item Crash Axe, because if you make him back off the screen, there is nothing to trigger the exit opening up, so you will actually create a soft lock situation. Wheelie Robot here. Takes a whole lot of hits, especially without the super spear, super sub weapons. So, Gatling gun does take a hit there, but still in okay shape. And now we go to the Optical Illusion boss. If you're a fan of Gradius, well, welcome to this. Depending on the difficulty and the version of the game, this boss shoots a separate number of orbs. In this case, on normal Japanese version, he just shoots 1 of each orb. Pretty easy to deal with, especially if you know how they're aimed and how to space them. And then you can only damage the boss when it turns into the pillar instead of the 2 men facing each other. This is also an interesting mini-boss just for the purpose that it's the only one in the game that takes purely static damage. No matter what you hit that pillar with, it doesn't matter what the damage value is supposed to be, it will always do 2 bars of the health bar. So we're going to move on to our 5th boss here, the Princess of Moss, which is a mistranslation in the English version. I will let you try and figure out what the actual translation was supposed to be, but we start off with our princess here. And she likes to float around, be a little annoying, and then fall to the ground. And then we get this. Hi, Mothra. So, this is a fight where the super sub-weapon is invaluable to Licard, because Licard can't actually reach this moth from the ground with an upstab. And Licard does not have an option to jump and attack upwards, which is something Morris has access to. So, that's so unfortunate. Ow. 1 axe away would have been dead. But just a little slow on the last one, unfortunately. That dive attack does a lot of damage. That's a lot of damage for Japanese normal. Japanese normal tones down the damage that the characters take quite a bit. So that's a pretty painful death. I actually thought might be able to survive that. But, so we'll run this back. I'm going to be a little bit slower this time just because far less sub-weapon ammo to work with, which is also kind of unfortunate because you want a lot of sub-weapon ammo going into stage 6, which is the final stage of Bloodlines. But let's take care of the old princess here before we worry about Dracula's castle. Okay, so we are out of axes, unfortunately, so now going to have to hope that Princess Amos flies low enough to get hit a few times, and there we go, just tanks some damage and gets through. So, good recovery there for wasure66. So yeah, we are 5/6 of the way through the game, actually. There are only 6 stages in Bloodlines. The caveat there is that the 6th stage is literally a third of the entire run. This run is incredibly backloaded. So you're going to see a very interesting stage 6. I like to refer to it as Dracula's House of Gimmicks, and you'll see why as we go in here. So first off, really nice background. If you've never seen this game, this is a late era Genesis game, and for my salt, this is one of the games that absolutely maximizes the Genesis or the Mega Drive if you're in Europe or Asia. It maximizes what you can get out of this particular system. And now, let the gimmicks begin. If you have problems adjusting to magic eye test, this is probably going to be a little bit of an uncomfortable hallway for you, but the general gist of how this works is you just watch your feet. And try not to worry about the splits in the platforms. When you know where everything is and when to jump, this becomes a pretty trivial room. This room is brutal in a casual run. This is really unfair the first couple times you do it. And then the gimmicks continue. We are now on the ceiling. Left and right are not reversed on your controller, but up and down are. And as if you've probably noticed like now, you can jump on and off of stairs in this game, which is not common in classic Castlevanias. To jump onto stairs, you have to hold up to attach onto the stairs once you leap onto them, and if you don't, you'll just fall through them. So in this case, you have to remember to switch and hold down. And now we are in the long corridor leading up to the boss rush that ends the game here. And if you remember the first boss in the game, Mr. Armor Battler, well, he has a whole family in this hallway, and they're not terribly happy about what you did to him. So they're going to spawn every few steps here randomly from the left or the right. So ideally you want them to spawn behind you. You have a lot more time to adjust and do a forward jump, turn, and attack behind. It's a really easy kill. And in that case, that's exactly why the forward ones are much more difficult to deal with. You got to really time out their spawn points. So unfortunately, now this means wasure66 is not going to have the super spear or the super sub weapon for the boss rush here, and that's a tall task. Lucard really leans heavily on the super sub weapon for the refights here. So, say hello to Death. Death likes to play cards. Death is kind of a nerd in the Bloodlines lore. So what we're going to do is we're going to refight the bosses from stages 2, 3, and 4. The one nice thing being is now they have half the amount of health they had in their original fights. So they do die much quicker this time. As you can see, already more than half the damage done. And he's only got a couple jumps in. And a nice quick kill there. Very well done from wasure66. So we're going to refight these 3 bosses. Dodge a couple stormtrooper-like shots from Death. And then we'll get to fight Death himself. So, as I said, Death shoots like a stormtrooper. Shoots where you were instead of where you're going. Gonna refight the Bat Gargoyle here. Same thing, he does take double the damage or has half health, whichever you want to put it. I can't remember what the actual rule is for how they're treated. I believe they have half the health, if I recall. But you still can't overdamage Gargoyle Bat on any of its cycles, so you still have to do all 3 phases, whether you like to or not. Listen to Gargoyle Bat make its angry noises that you're doing damage to it. Very nice fight there. Those are both excellent fights for not having access to the Super Spear. The Super Spear does 8 total damage, not 8 bars of damage. The bars are just representative of the total amount of health the enemies have. But, so, the regular Spear only does 6. So you lose 2 damage per hit, and as you've seen, a lot of these bosses take a significant amount of hits. This is where wasure66 is going to lose the most time for not having access to the super sub weapon, because ideally what you would do is throw 3 super sub weapons and Stone Golem's just dead instantly. You just out tank him and it's super easy. Now he's slow enough, we can just chain axes. Should go down pretty quickly. Just be a little careful. You don't want to give up too much health before fighting Death. And there we go. Fairly quick there for not having access to the super sub weapon. So our first 3 refights are down. We still have 6 boss fights left, by the way, before the game is done. They really like bosses and sub-bosses on the Genesis. Konami did this a lot, where they would just load their franchises on the Genesis with tons of bosses. So, but it does make this game very interesting. So we're gonna fight Death himself. Death is interesting. You know, Death tends to be either one of the most brutal fights in the game or very simple. In this case, Death has the lowest amount of health for a boss in the entire game. He has a whopping 50 HP, and as I told you, the basic spear does 6, so you're looking at a whole 9 hits to kill him. If you're playing John Morris and have his fully upgraded plasma whip, that's 5 hits to kill Death. He never touches the ground. It's quite funny. But now, with Death out of the way, we are going to move on to the Blood Countess, Elizabeth Bathory, except wait, it's actually Medusa. So to contrast Death, Medusa has the most health in the entire game out of any boss or any creature at 256. So this is going to take a lot of hits. Thankfully, Medusa is very contrived in her patterns. They're all set in stone. She does the same thing every time. It's pretty easy to dodge all of it. So fire the fireball, fire the flame spread here, use tail whip. It's not very effective. And then die. So good fight there again. Took a little bit of extra time just because of the sheer amount of damage Lasoriamono is losing from not having the powered up spear, but solid all around. And now we will fight Elizabeth Bathory, the Blood Countess. This Castlevania borrows really heavily on the lore from other things. So I'm going to let this boss fight speak for itself. You've seen it. You've seen the whole fight. Elizabeth will teleport whatever way you are not, whatever side of the screen you are further away from. And the interesting thing is that she is the only boss in the game that takes full damage from sub-weapons. So using the axe on her is actually optimal to kill her quickly. The only hit that will do damage is the last one. In the English version, this character is actually listed as Elizabeth Bartley due to a minor mistranslation. But it is a direct reference to the story of the Blood Countess. To combine that with the rest of the Castlevania Bloodlines lore, you may have noticed that the whip character is not a Belmont, it's John Morris. John Morris is the direct descendant of Quincy Morris, aka the protagonist from Bram Stoker's Dracula. So yes, this game actually is directly tied to the novel by Bram Stoker. That is canon Castlevania lore, that those two universes have intertwined and exist within one another. So Elizabeth is gone, and we can finally move on to the final fights of the game. We do get a very nice rendition of Simon's theme from the CV4 soundtrack. So we make our way up to the final corridor, because it wouldn't be a fight with a classic Dracula if you didn't climb some staircases with the moon shining in the background. So, in an unheard of moment in Castlevania history, Dracula is going to teleport around the room, appear, and shoot fireballs at you. I know, crazy talk. The nice thing about this particular Dracula fight is his teleports are completely scripted. There's no randomness to it. He always goes the same place every single time. Always happens in a set order. So this is actually a very trivial fight to deal with. Every fourth teleport or so, the teleport will appear wherever you're standing, so you just make sure you're moving, and it's an easy dodge. This is one of these spots where Lacard is actually much slower than Morris, just because Dracula has a pretty healthy amount of HP behind him, and you only get to hit him once per teleport, so you kind of have to sit there and let him do his thing, think he's going to hit you, be really cute about it, and then one more, and we'll get to go on to Phase 2. So, regular Dracula is defeated, hooray, but wait, there's more. We're going to introduce the Sorcerer, or what I like to call Diet Shaft, if you are familiar with Symphony of the Night and Rondo. This character is pretty easy to deal with. That's a great pattern and a really great fight. Nicely done by Lasoriamono. That is the fastest you can kill the Sorcerer. You can always kill him with enough damage when that fireball attack goes off, but he won't die till they leave the screen. So, final fight here. Someone knew what Zombor was from Chrono Trigger before Chrono Trigger was even made, and was apparently a huge fan of the design. So, welcome to Final Form Dracula. This fight can be really difficult to get under control if you let him move around too much. Right now, Wasorimono really wants to push him back to the corner, get under him. There we go. All right, now we can upstab. Wasorimono is safe here. He cannot be hit by any attack because those flames have a really bad hitbox. All right, now. Final phase, Wasorimono going to need to be a little careful, play enough damage without getting hit by any of the bone attacks. Cross under. Oh, going to stay on this side. That's a bold play. Should have enough. Nice. Okay, well done. Well done. And that's it. 3 forms of Dracula down, 22 bosses and sub-bosses slain. And that is a wrap on Castlevania Bloodlines, aka Vampire Killer for the Mega Drive. A few bits of hiccups there, but overall a very solid marathon run. This is a very difficult marathon game. Even the Japanese version, things do a lot of damage. There's a lot of ways for things to go awry. And so, very nicely done by Wasorimono. Very cool to see the Japanese community picking this up. This is probably the least commonly speedrun classic Castlevania. It's not a favored one compared to the NES and SNES classics, but it's an excellent game. Highly recommended if you've never played Bloodlines. It is on the Castlevania collection, which you can get on pretty much every console and Steam at this point, and is definitely worth a playthrough if you've never gone through this. Really fun. So, but that is going to get us through this. This is a little bit of an interesting cutscene because this version of Lucard is much more anime pretty compared to the English version. They kind of toughened up his face, made his jaw a little bit more manly. So, of course, you know, on the Genesis does what Nintendo don't, so we got to make sure we can't have too much anime pretty on our system. But yeah, all in all, very solid marathon run. This is I consider this to be personally the second most difficult of the classic Castlevanias to play in a casual setting. I feel only Castlevania 3 is more difficult to actually get a completed playthrough in. In the US version, you actually have a difficult thing to deal with, which is that this is the only Castlevania game that actually has limited continues in the US version. The Japanese version does not have continues, nor does it have a password system, whereas the US version has both, which is kind of an interesting change. So the credits here rolling, get a nice classic end of Castlevania track, get to see all the bosses. I believe you get to see the Gear Steamer animation, which again is probably the single cutest thing in the entire game. Since we didn't have any deaths there, you didn't have to see it. But all in all, really, really good run. I'd like to see more people picking this up. The Genesis is not terribly popular in Japan for speedrunning at all, so to see both this game and the Genesis get a little bit of love is always cool. But if you're a fan of this, I haven't been doing runs much lately, but I'm happy to direct anyone who's working on this game. It's really fun to watch, especially at high level, and has a lot of difficult tricks and interesting tech built into it over the 9 or so years that I've been playing it, and then even before when one of the super OG Genesis runners, Stansky, used to run this game. So it's got a lot of history that you don't really get to see too often. So looks like my feed might have cut out. So unfortunately, I can't see what else is going on at this point, but I hope you all enjoyed the run. And again, shout outs to Wasorimono. Be sure to follow him on Twitch. I'm sure he'll be working on this more and trying to improve his times. US version is more difficult. Yes, this is one of those games that the Konami folks decided to torture their US audience and up the difficulty. Very similar to how Castlevania 3 was tuned up quite a bit. Bloodlines, especially on the expert mode, is a brutal game. Lucard can actually die in about 4 hits on enemies, even in stage 1 in the US version on expert. So it gets very scary very quickly. So the if you want the ultimate challenge, then the big play is to try and play all the way through expert mode on the US version. You don't actually get expert mode unlocked until you beat normal, but this is a Konami game. There might be a certain code you could utilize if you just want to check out expert mode out of the gate. So feel free to utilize that if you ever get a chance to play the Castlevania collection, or if you're lucky enough to have a working Genesis or Mega Drive and can track down a copy of this. Also worth picking up. This card has become quite expensive in the last few years. Unfortunately, it's it's again one of those late era Genesis carts that is not easy to get a hold of. So, but that's what the Castlevania collection is for. The nice thing about the collection, while we're filling some time here, is that despite this being a Genesis game and Genesis kind of having a notorious life cycle of not being the most accurate when emulated, this is a perfect port. I actually did a whole lot of testing and work to see how well this port timed up against the original Genesis, and it is flawless. It is actually a 1-to-1 timing. So all I can really say is that M2 are a bunch of wizards. I don't know how they did it. I never in a million years would have expected this to be able to work perfectly compared to the Genesis original, but it actually is really, really nice for someone like me who speedruns this game, because now I don't have to try and hook up a Genesis through an OSSC and all those things to make it function. So the luxury of modern console and modern ports that actually work really well. Which the other nice thing is that it means you don't have to use a Genesis controller. If you're like me, I used to go through Genesis controllers like coffee paper running this game. So having access to, I play on the PS4 personally, but having access to your favorite console controller to play this is also a nice bonus with the Castlevania collection.